All right, sir. Let's start with John Bolton, because that's the big news overnight. John Bolton, according to an unpublished manuscript of his book obtained by the New York Times, or at least, no, wait, let me rephrase that. Characterized, at the very least, to the New York Times by sources who have seen it. The Times says in their headline that Trump did tie Ukraine aid to inquiries he sought. Bolton book says. Your reaction this morning, Joe?
So what? It doesn't matter what the president said or thought. What matters is what he did. And in fact, the military and security aid was cleared up. Mm-hmm. The separate matter of the Javelin missiles, they were delivered. He did what the Obama administration never did. He delivered lethal aid to Ukraine to use against the Russians on their eastern front. Mm-hmm. Whatever Bolton's book says doesn't matter because it's irrelevant. It's titillating for those who are looking for anything to smear the president, but it doesn't mean anything. The president, for example, said he was concerned about burden sharing, is insufficient burden sharing by Europe in Ukraine. He was worried about corruption, the historic corruption in the Ukrainian government. He was worried about corrupt activities in 2016 that may have corrupted the U.S. election. I find all this about Bolton to be nonsense.
Joe, all of these quote-unquote leaks that are coming out, I'm just curious as to your take on this, because I see this as coordinated by the Democrats to leak these things out when the Republicans are giving the defense of the president to take the focus off of that defense. So I'm sure that there are more things coming. Do you disagree?
Sure. And what's very, very interesting is, I don't know if you know this or not, but you'll never forget, of course, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, yes. The great pontificator and scholar on the NSC who disagreed with the President of the United States, and so therefore the President should be impeached. Believe it or not, Alexander Vindman's brother, Yevgeny, works on the National Security Council, according to the American Thinker, and is involved as an ethics officer in book reviews at the NSC. So guess who was reviewing John Bolton's book? Mr. Vindman's brother.
His twin brother, no less. You ever see the pictures of them together? They look exactly alike. That's how it works.
Wow.
Two little pudgy-faced spies.
Oh, frickin' frack over here, dealing with trying to bring down the president. So that's interesting. I did see a Breitbart news report this morning indicating that a source close to the Trump administration indicated that to them as well, that Yevgeny Vindman is in charge of reviewing all of these publications by current and former NSC officials.
Yep.
Yeah, so very likely that he was the one who leaked. Let's talk about another piece of evidence that the media is very exercised about, and it's that Lev Parnas released an April 2018 conversation that was very clearly videotaped surreptitiously at the Trump International Hotel between at least himself and the President of the United States, discussing a range of issues. What do you make of that recording?
Well, it's once again, it's of no value or moment other than it shows the President of the United States being informed, apparently for the first time in 2018 by Mr. Parnas and others, that Marie Yovanovitch, the United States ambassador to Ukraine, was bad-mouthing him, was saying that Ukrainian officials should not listen to the President because he was going to be impeached, a number of other things. The real question is, and I think you said this earlier, why did it take so long for her to be fired if the president wanted her fired? He had, of course, he could fire an ambassador for any reason whatsoever. So there's nothing wrong with the president saying at that dinner table, get rid of her, fire her if she's bad-mouthing me, if she's undercutting me with Ukrainian officials, get her out of there. In fact, that would be the natural reaction of a John F. Kennedy or a Lyndon Johnson, who did exactly the same thing many times. The reason it took a year to get rid of her is that Mike Pompeo didn't want to get rid of her. He said, look, she's the head of the LGBTQ organization and community in the State Department. I do not want to take her on. If you want me to get rid of her, bring me information, the material showing that she is not doing the work of the President of the United States. And so he tasked those later to do that. And that's why she wasn't gotten rid of right away. Mike Pompeo did not want to take on the LGBT community inside the Department of State. And by the way, she was blocking visas for people like Shokin and Yurchenko to come to the United States to talk to Justice Department officials. And what were they going to talk about?
Yeah.
They were going to talk about corruption in Burisma, the Bidens. She didn't want them coming to the United States. Listen, Yovanovitch was an evil, nasty, bad person.
Okay.
She's a Democrat, and that's what she wanted to do.
Now, Joe, if he had problems with worried about the impact they would have on LGBT messaging or whatever, could he not have turned to just Rick Grinnell, the ambassador to Germany, the most, he's openly gay, he's super supportive of the Trump administration. He would have come out and supported them instantly in that case.
And you are absolutely right. And many people are apparently told the president that, just use Rick Grinnell.
Yeah.
But Joe, look at the date on this. The date on this is April 30th of 2018. So doesn't that show that there have been suspicions about Burisma, about the Ukraine, about corruption in 2018, a year before the phone call with the Ukrainian president?
Well, not only that, there was not only suspicions. The New York Times killed a story about Burisma and the Bidens and the corrupt Bidens back in 2016. Remember, when Marie Yovanovitch was being primed for her testimony before the Senate to become the ambassador to Ukraine, she was told by the Obama White House, if you were asked about the Biden problem with Burisma, just refer the questioners to the vice president's office. They knew exactly what the problem was. They knew the appearance of impropriety. They knew that there was corruption involving the Biden family. And they were all very, very worried about it.
Joe, one other thing here. This recording by Parnas and Fruman, which is clearly surreptitious. I mean, there's something deeply scummy about recording the president in such a way that he clearly had no knowledge of this. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, it's a betrayal of trust, even if it's not illegal, because as you so aptly noted earlier, Washington, D.C. is a one-party consent jurisdiction, so you can record any conversation on your phone or in person as long as you're there and you're part of the conversation. You do not need the consent of anybody. But this was a breach of faith, a breach of trust, and then to have it come out and to embarrass the president, because it proves absolutely nothing improper. The president was angry about an ambassador who was not doing her job. So I think it's, again, regrettably, Mr. Parnas has decided, I think it's more his lawyer, Mr. Bondi, than Mr. Parnas, that he's going to just simply continue to make waves with no apparent logical reason.
All right, more with Joe diGenova in just a minute. We're going to get his reaction to the president's defense team finally opening fire this weekend, finally getting a chance to fight back. We're talking to Joe diGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. attorney to the District of Columbia. Joe, the President of the United States, his defense team began its process in the Senate on Saturday. They went for a couple hours, and they started with what they say is a 6-point defense, going point by point that the transcript shows that the President did everything right, that he did not condition security assistance or a meeting on anything. And they have, of course, emphasized that even, President Zelensky said that he never felt pressure and that the Ukrainians didn't even know the security assistance was ever paused until the end of August. So that was 1 month after that call. What did you make of their defense?
I thought it was done very well. I thought particularly well done was the use of the videotape of Adam Schiff making up the phone call with the president in what Schiff later called a parody, as he called it. He didn't think people would believe it was true. He clearly was trying to mislead the American people, Schiff was, when he made that false reading of the transcript between the president and Zelensky. I thought that was superb. I thought the use of the videotapes to show the parts of statements by witnesses that were left out, particularly Ambassador Sondland, excuse me. So the bottom line is I thought they were excellent, succinct, to the point, and as opposed to the 3-day infomercial, political propaganda and political theater that the Democrats did. Not only did they put on a repetitive, stupid case, they were disingenuous. They lied repeatedly. And there's a great story by Charles Dickens called Bleak House. And in it, there's a conniving, corrupt, unethical lawyer named Mr. Tulkinghorn. Mr. Schiff is Mr. Tulkinghorn. It is really amazing how disgustingly Dickensian Schiff has become.
You know, Joe, do you think that we're going to see Trump's team take up all 3 days that they have to do this? Or
No.
are they just going to put it out there, cut it short, and that's that?
I think they're going to cut it short, and then they're going to wait for the consummate fabulist, Mr. Schiff, to respond during the argument period, during the 16 hours that is allotted for argument at the end. There's going to be questions, written questions, which is, of course, the worst possible way to ask questions, which is exactly the way the Senate designed it, because they didn't want senators making speeches. So they forced them to write their questions down on paper. I think the president's defense team wisely will get most of its points in today, and I don't even think they'll use up all their time today.
Will the president's team, in your view, open up an artery on Hunter Biden and Joe Biden? Will they begin the process of talking about their credibility?
I don't know that. Certainly, it is very obvious that certainly the Democrats have opened the door to the Biden testimony as a result of the arguments they've made about what they claim the president was trying to do. As a result of that, they have made the Bidens not only relevant and material, but absolutely necessary to be called if witnesses are going to be called. So I don't think it's necessary for the defense team, the president's defense team, to bring it up any further. I think what they're going to do is pound on the unconstitutionality when Alan Dershowitz gets up and delivers his presentation, and then move on to further analysis of how this is not a legitimate impeachment process, that it is fundamentally dishonest, that it is deceitful, that it is a misreading of the Constitution, and that it was improperly authorized in the House. So I think that's their best gambit. I would leave the Bidens out of it as much as possible unless the Democratic managers bring it up in their closing arguments.
You know, Joe, one of the things that's glaringly missing, at least for me, from this entire proceeding is the transcript of the ICIG Michael Atkinson's testimony that was done behind closed doors. Do we ever see it?
Well, that's a very interesting question. It's pretty clear, by the way, that Mr. Atkinson was part of the grand scheme to ensnare the president in this. He went behind the back of the Director of National Intelligence to go to Adam Schiff. He used to work for Mary McCord, the Assistant Attorney General for National Security in the Obama administration, and was directly involved, Atkinson, in the 4 FISA warrants, 2 of which have found to be illegal recently. The other 2 are deemed to be probably also illegal. Atkinson is dirty. How he ever got to be the Inspector General of the intelligence community is another example of the horrendous personnel operation in the Trump White House. Michael Atkinson, let me repeat this, is dirty. His role in this is being kept secret by Schiff, because if Atkinson's testimony is ever revealed, it means that Schiff is absolutely a witness because of the way he handled Eric Ciaramella, the fake whistleblower. And Atkinson connived with Ciaramella and Schiff to make sure that this false allegation of the president got to the Hill. It's a bizarre story, but you've got it, Mary. Mr. Atkinson may be the single most important witness, along with Mr. Ciaramella.
Yeah, a couple more stones that are totally worth overturning. Thank you very much, Joe diGenova. Good to talk to you. Talk to you next week.